on to Trial 2 of Chariots of Fire. This one's the Battle of Sekmem. And we've got Egyptians versus Canaanites. This is, again, a pre-chariot battle. I think this is the last one without chariots, but I'm not sure. In fact, this is the only one without even proto-chariots. Kind of an interesting situation here. The Canaanites are inside their city of Sekmem. Now, this is going to serve as their rallying flag. And the Egyptians are going to come in from the north here, coming on from off-map. The Egyptians have the option to come on in column. I'm not sure I see any real advantage to that unless they want to travel over this terrain here, which is rough terrain. I don't see that as a positive. And the Canaanites will be coming onto the board in column from their city. You'll notice they're stacked, which is normally not allowed, but it's just for this scenario. And when the units rout, they fall back into Sekmem, and can be rallied there. Now, if it's treated as a standard, I believe the overall commander or a commander has to run back there to rally them and bring them out. This one has kind of, well, we have kind of a large number of light infantry for the Egyptians and an even larger number for the Canaanites. And in this scenario, they remind you of one little factor, which is you can shoot over the heads of your units. We discussed this in the intro, but I forgot it last time. And they kind of suggest, hey, you want to kind of deploy your shock infantry in the front and your missile behind them. Sort of the opposite of what all the battles in SPQR deploy with skirmishers out front. But the reason for it is that these missile-armed troops are vulnerable, as they are in SPQR, to the shock attacks. However, they are faster, which means they can run away, but they have very little chance of it with their low tactical quality. They're likely to fail and just dissolve. So, giving them a protective screen makes sense in this. I don't know. I'm a little iffy about this firing over the heads of the units as a general tactic, but we'll see. We'll see. You know, just in terms of, okay, why would this change between the two? The formations, the density, I don't know. But it seems a little odd to me. Anyway, we kick this one off. We don't know who goes first because it's a chit pull system. So we'll see what happens. So there aren't a lot of column markers, but basically column movement is very similar to normal movement, except you don't pay to change facing. You get an extra movement point with your units. And we just kind of spread them out here. Starting to deploy, we're going to swing out to the middle, kind of maybe leaning a little towards Sekmem, and then convert into a line formation and start marching forward to engage. We probably want to keep Sekmem not too far from us. It's essentially invulnerable to the Egyptians. There's no siege weaponry or anything like that here. It just serves as our rallying place. Point-wise, our both sides are at 40 points. That's supposedly leaning in favor of the Canaanites because they're defending their home territory. Anyway, we don't know who's up next. We had a roll for, see, I can see in the damn cup. Alright, so what do we have? We have another Canaanite. This is, geez. Okay, well, this is the second wing, which I shouldn't have moved yet. They just moved. Alright. And we get an Egyptian momentum move. I don't want to take it. We're not close enough for that to matter. Our momentum move, don't want to take it. Okay, the Pharaoh's command. The Pharaoh's command is my choice. It can either be the shock units or it can be the missile units. Probably was supposed to declare this earlier, but I think he's going to lead his shock units. Now, yeah, alright, let's see what we bring on then. And that's essentially the situation at the end of the first turn. I kind of put some reserve shock units in the second rank, but I think they're going to end up filling in the first rank. because of the peculiarities of being able to fire over one hex. One thing to note about the slingers, the Canaanites have a significant number of slinger units in addition to plain old archers, is that they can't fire more than one hex. The bows can fire 2 hexes, the slingers can only fire 1, so they're going to kind of slide to the flanks and have to engage well, more closely, really, and at more risk to themselves, which is painful because although they're not worth a lot, there aren't a lot of route points available. Alright, pretty much finished up the movement for the second round. The Egyptians still coming forward kind of slowly. They don't want to go into column and come out of it. Might gain a couple movement points, but it's just more, I don't know, annoyance. And we're letting the Canaanites deploy, therefore, but they pretty much have a chance no matter what. One thing to note, though, the distance that the commanders can hold is stretched to its limits at this scenario. So, for example, the Canaanite leader actually stretching from this side to this side, he's got everything in command, but he can't do it all in one line. So he's going to have to kind of throw those slingers out in forward position, I think, to extend the infantry line. With the Egyptians, similarly, the Pharaoh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, he's almost got his forces completely extended as far as they can go too. So it's kind of tough to see. One thing that I want to consider is what to do with the standard. In the last battle, the Akkadians were hard-pressed because their standard was being overrun. It was too far forward. The problem is, if it's not far forward, you're never going to have your units in command and be able to rally at the same time in that scenario. This scenario with multiple leaders, especially, well, see, the Pharaoh would be more sensible as the archery leader or the skirmisher leader or whatever you want to say, the bowman, rather than as leading the front lines because of that. But the other guy can also do a rally from back there. That's legitimate as well. He's just not as good at it is the problem. With this force, well, they're kind of stuck having to stay close to Sekmem or else they're going to have a problem. And they're not going to be able to rally their troops. And you want to have, I mean, rallying troops is important. It's not like in SPQR where they're going to run off the map and you're going to lose points for them. But you do kind of want to recycle them and bring them back into battle in order to have your full firepower available. So that's going to be kind of a tricky comparison to make because this leader is absolutely vital to keeping his bowmen in command. He can't go back and rally his troops without throwing all his bows out of command. Quick end of another turn and we see more and more approach coming. Nothing too interesting happening here. I'm not sure, you know, I'm still kind of feeling out the system, so I'm not trying any kind of tricky tactics or anything, you know. That kind of is beyond me anyway, tactics. But we definitely have the, hey, let's try to engage with the firing and the shot, behind the shock. Test that out, see how it works. Basically, these early scenarios, trying to get a feel for how the actual infantry works. Then maybe the next scenario we'll be able to see a small number of chariots, I'm not sure. And that'll be a nice entry level into the game in a way that I probably didn't have with SPQR because I think one of the earlier scenarios was a pretty hefty one actually. Well, the Canaanites just won the initiative. That means they have to pick the first chit to play. And, you know, I hate doing this because I don't want to be the guy who goes further. I don't want to go any further. Sekmem is where I am. So what I'm going to do, actually, is I'm going to pick the momentum chit. Because that's the one that hurts me the least to not have. And see what comes up from that. Hopefully let the Egyptians approach. Well, the Canaanites did not. They got their next pick was the rear line, which they don't want to move, of course. And then a momentum chip for the Egyptians. They chose to move forward. They may actually make a charge, taking the tactical quality hits in order to get that first strike in, especially if they can hit, you know, a little to the flank and try to get that advantage that way. This may be very ugly. That double rank with the archers behind so densely that the Canaanites have could be a serious problem. Their missile firing capability didn't do very much. I don't think they actually did any damage at all. They mainly wiped out their missiles. I guess they forgot to bring bullets. But now they have to make tactical quality checks all along the line, and chances are actually pretty good to go in favor of the guy who swings first in this game. And that first powerful hit, remember, only the defender has to check tactical quality. Broke some holes in the line, but then, for example, here where they broke through, they got routed by the archers behind there. They're here. For the most part, one thing, lots of engaged markers already in play, and I'm using less than I need to. Really, it's kind of a 1-for-1 along this line. I probably need 2 more. I've got some in there theoretically, but I can cover the whole thing kind of explaining what's happening there. Got a breakthrough here, and point-wise, well, here's the losses that the Canaanites have had. They're down to 32 route points left. They've got a lot of points, though. This is not an easy battle to win, but now the Canaanites are in kind of an interesting position. They've already gotten their momentum and their rear line shit. If they draw their front line shit, they're going to have to trigger these guys off and actually fight this battle. There's more of a sense of time using this chip pulse activation than there is in the standard Great Battles of History activation that I'm used to, at least from SPQR. Where you kind of, I don't know, you can pass with an activation, essentially. I don't think you can here. I'm not positive of that. I'll look that up. But regardless of what happens, there's kind of this less chance of trumping in, less of all that action. So the battles become, in a way, less chaotic, which to me just doesn't feel like Great Battles of History. I think the chip pull's an interesting alternative, but and one that maybe should have been offered for all the series. But to tell you the truth, there's something that I kind of like about the system, the initiative system, both in SPQR and in also the supposedly non-Great Battles of History, but they feel as much like it as this does, the Men of Iron and Infidel, where you have more control over which units are pushing, but there's less of this, okay, the battle is just steadily progressing everywhere, and more of a, all right, things are really hot over here, and less of an absolute time stricture, and men can move this far in this time, and more of a, okay, well, sometimes you can't get your troops moving. Sometimes stuff just doesn't happen. That doesn't seem to happen with the chip pull system as much. So on the Egyptian right flank, things looked like they were going very, very poorly, and that's where my first die rolls were. You can see the Canaanites have pushed through there, and they killed a couple of big units permanently, routed a couple of units. But over on this side, the Egyptians held up pretty well. The big advantage, of course, that the Canaanites had is the Egyptians ran an extra space. They had an extra hit on them. In general, you do 2 points each when you're facing these shock infantry versus shock infantry. That's almost assured. Basically, you need to roll a 1 to do worse than that, and you need to roll a 7 or higher to do better than that. The advantage is still on the attacker for that. And no matter what in this game, there's no... in SPQR, there was kind of this, okay, well, if you charged into combat, you had the advantage, but if you were locked into combat and rolled the attack dice, you were at a disadvantage, which, between that and the fact that you have a lot of control over whether or not you want to fight that combat, you could kind of keep things at a mellow state of engagement for as long as you liked, and kind of had, I guess, a certain level of incentive to do so. Well, in this, you don't have that option. You have these engaged markers, which more or less push you into battle, and I kind of like that aspect, although I can come up with reasons why the SPQR model works as well. Anyway, loss-wise, let's see what our points are. This, I think, is the end of the turn. We're at 29 for these and 4 more for these. Puts them at 28. It's a very close battle at this point. More routed Canaanites than there are Egyptians. The cup's empty, which means we'll be hitting a new turn. And there's not a lot to do in between turns. These guys aren't going to be able to reload. They're too close to the enemy. Nothing else really has an effect. Routed units don't go running, nothing like that. I'm going to load this one up, and I guess we're about there.